The shattering of a fated bond does not sound like a roar. It sounds like glass splintering inside the marrow of your bones. Elena Brooks stood on the cold marble floor of the high Lycan citadel, her chest heaving as the phantom agony of a severed soul tie ripped through her chest. Just hours ago, her hands had been stained with the black, venomous blood of the Lycan plague. She had spent 3 sleepless weeks in the dark, suffocating trenches of the infirmary, breathing in death, using her rare human gift of cellular regeneration to pull the dying back from the brink. She had saved hundreds of warriors. She had saved the king himself. And now this was her reward. High above her on the obsidian throne sat King James Hunt. His golden Lycan eyes, once softened by the haze of fever when she held his head in her lap and pulled the toxin from his veins, were now cold, calculating and utterly detached. Surrounding the throne, the high lords and elders of the Pack Council sneered down at her, their predatory scents of sulfur and heavy musk filling the massive chamber. A human. Elder Vance's voice had boomed through the hall moments earlier, dripping with ancient disgust. The moon goddess mocks us. A frail, bloodless creature with no claws, no fur and no wolf cannot bear the heirs of the Crescent Throne. She would weaken our bloodline. She is a mistake. Elena had looked to James, her heart pounding against her ribs, waiting for the man whose life she had just bought back with her own vitality to defend her. The invisible golden thread of the fated mate bond had pulsed between them, blindingly bright, screaming that they belonged to one another. But James had looked at the angry, muttering nobles, then down at his own clawed hands and finally at her. The cowardice in his eyes was more lethal than any blade. "I, King James Hunt of the Crescent Kingdom," his voice echoed, laced with the crushing authority of an alpha king, "hereby reject you, Elena Brooks, as my mate and the Luna of this pack. You are dismissed from my court." The words struck her like a physical blow. Elena gasped, dropping to her knees as the golden thread snapped, turning into a searing, agonizing black fire that burned her from the inside out. The rejection of a fated mate was enough to kill a human, and the council knew it. They watched with cruel, expectant smiles, waiting for her to wither and die on the floor. James turned his face away, refusing to look at the agony he had just inflicted. "Before we witness the terrifying consequences of this betrayal and find out how a broken human survives the wrath of a Lycan king, I want to welcome each and every one of you to the channel. Thank you for stepping into this world with me today. Whether you are listening from a quiet room in the United States, a bustling street in London, or anywhere else across the globe, I am deeply grateful to have you here. How are you all doing today? If you haven't already, please take a quick second to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications and join our storytelling family. Your incredible support keeps these epic tales alive. Now let us dive right back into the darkness. Elena did not die. She refused to give them the satisfaction. Clenching her bleeding fists against the cold marble, she forced herself back to her feet. The physical pain was an absolute inferno, but the cold fury hardening around her heart was stronger. She looked directly into the eyes of the king who had traded his soul for a crown. "I saved your life, James," she whispered, her voice cutting through the sudden, shocked silence of the courtroom as she stood upright, defying the crushing pressure of his alpha aura. "And you have just signed your own doom." The guards moved in, their heavy iron boots clicking against the stone, but Elena didn't wait to be dragged out. She turned on her heel, her tattered, herb-stained cloak billowing behind her as she walked out of the citadel into the freezing rain of the northern night. She had nothing left. No pack, no mate, and, according to the laws of the Wolf Kingdom, no right to live within their borders. As the heavy iron gates of the Wolf City slammed shut behind her, casting her out into the lawless, deadly perimeter known as the Dead Woods, the rain washed the royal blood from her hands. But the darkness waiting for her in the woods wasn't empty. Something ancient, deep, and terrifyingly powerful was stirring in the shadows, drawn to the bleeding, broken void inside her chest. How will a rejected human with no wolf survive the deadliest monsters of the realm, and what dark, forbidden power is about to awaken within her blood? The freezing rain did not stop, nor did the agonizing ache in Elena's chest. Every step she took away from the borders of the Crescent Kingdom felt like dragging a blade through her lungs. The fated bond, now nothing but a blackened, severed stump inside her soul, throbbed with a hollow, weeping agony. Yet as she pushed deeper into the twisted, gnarled expanse of the Dead Woods, she did not shed a single tear. Elena had spent her entire life knowing exactly what she was in the eyes of the wolves. A second-class citizen. A fragile, temporary thing meant to be tolerated only because her hands held a rare, miraculous gift. She was a cellular healer, capable of drawing physical trauma, disease, and necrotic tissue out of a living body and neutralizing it within her own resilient human cells. She had never desired power, nor had she ever craved the opulence of the royal court. Her deepest, most burning desire had always been simple: to find a place where she belonged, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to live without the constant, suffocating fear of predatory violence. Instead, that very gift had made her a target. For weeks she had worked herself to the bone in the plague wards, alongside her mentor and only true friend, Arthur Cross. Arthur was an elderly human physician who had taught her how to survive the volatile temperaments of the Lycan nobility. He was the closest thing she had to a father, a man whose hands were scarred from decades of suturing wounds that wolves deemed beneath their dignity to heal. As Elena stumbled over a slick tree root, a memory flashed vividly in her mind. Arthur grabbing her wrist in the dimly lit infirmary just 3 nights ago, his eyes wide with stark terror as King James lay gasping on the operating table. "Elena, listen to me," Arthur had whispered, his voice trembling as he watched the golden aura of the fated bond begin to spark between Elena and the dying king. "If he survives this and if the pack realizes what you are to him, they will not celebrate. They will see you as a disease. A king's vulnerability is a death sentence for the human who holds it. If he rejects you, you must run. Do not look back." She hadn't listened. She had believed, in some naive, foolish corner of her heart, that the ancient laws of the moon goddess would hold weight. She had believed that James, who had looked into her eyes as she absorbed the black, suffocating plague from his lungs, would feel the same cosmic pull that she did. Now, shivering under her soaked cloak, she realized how utterly blind she had been. The Lycans didn't care about cosmic laws. They cared about strength, dominance, and bloodlines. To them, a human mate was a genetic dead end, a stain on their pristine, predatory heritage. Suddenly, a snap of a heavy branch shattered the silence of the forest. Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat as her heightened survival instincts, honed by years of living around apex predators, screamed at her to hide. The air grew thick, dropping in temperature until her breath plumed in heavy white clouds. The ambient light of the moon seemed to warp, the shadows between the ancient trees stretching, elongating, and detaching themselves from the bark. A scent filled the air completely unlike the sulfur and musk of the wolves. This scent was cold, sharp, and intoxicatingly rich, like crushed winter mint, ozone, and ancient undisturbed earth. From the dense canopy of the shadows, a figure materialized. He did not walk so much as emerge from the darkness itself, as if the night had simply chosen to take human form. He was tall, commanding, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the color of a midnight sky, flecked with liquid silver. His dark hair was brushed back, and he wore a heavy midnight black coat embroidered with subtle, glowing silver runes along the collar. The sheer, suffocating gravity of his presence made the alpha aura of King James seem like a flickering candle compared to a raging storm. Yet strangely, the terrifying hollow void in Elena's chest did not scream in pain at his approach. Instead, for the first time in hours, the burning ache began to cool. The stranger stopped 10 paces from her, his silver-flecked eyes raking over her shivering form, lingering on the blackened, bruised skin peeking above her collar, the physical manifestation of the rejection mark. A dark, dangerous scowl crossed his face, a flash of pure, unadulterated menace crossing his features before it vanished behind a mask of calm composure. "So," the stranger spoke, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that vibrated right through the soles of Elena's boots. "This is how the great Alpha King repays the woman who pulled him from the gates of the underworld. By throwing her to the beasts of the border." Elena gripped her medical satchel tighter against her side, her knuckles turning white. "Who are you?" she demanded, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the violent trembling of her limbs. "Are you one of his scouts? Did he send you to finish the job?" The man let out a short, humorless laugh, stepping closer. The shadows around his boots rippled like liquid silk. "James Hunt does not possess the vision, nor the authority to command me, little healer. My name is Thomas Vance, and I rule a realm where the light of your arrogant wolves cannot reach." Thomas Vance. The Shadow King. Elena's heart skipped a beat. Every fairy tale, Every ancient medical text she had ever read warned of the Shadow Realm, a hidden dark mirror to the mortal world, populated by creatures who commanded the primordial forces of the dark. They were said to be ruthless, cold, and utterly hostile to mortals. "What do you want with me?" Elena asked, backing up until her spine hit the rough bark of an oak tree. "I have nothing left. My power is spent. My bond is broken." Thomas stopped just inches away from her. He didn't reach for her, but the sheer proximity of his body radiated a strange, protective warmth that defied the freezing rain. He tilted his head, staring down into her hazel eyes with a terrifying intensity. "Your bond with the wolf was a leash, Elena," Thomas whispered, his silver eyes flashing in the darkness. "A leash meant to keep a celestial wellspring of power confined to a parlor trick for beasts. He didn't break you. He unlocked you. And I am here to offer you the crown he was too cowardly to give you." Before we find out what terrifying price Thomas expects Elena to pay for this dark offer, I want to take a moment to ask you all a question. Drop a comment below right now and let me know. If you were in Elena's shoes, would you trust the mysterious Shadow King, or would you take your chances alone in the wilderness? I read every single comment, and your theories keep this channel thriving. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you are hooked on her journey. Elena stared at Thomas, her analytical mind fighting against the sudden, overwhelming pull she felt toward him. It wasn't the forced, cosmic compulsion of the fated bond she had shared with James. This was something different. Felt like an invitation. An invitation to a dark, dangerous freedom she had never dared to imagine. But as she opened her mouth to speak, a deafening feral howl tore through the night sky, originating from the border of the Crescent Kingdom. James's enforcers were hunting. And they were heading straight for her. The howl that tore through the forest canopy wasn't a warning. It was a death warrant. It was the synchronized, bloodthirsty cry of the Crescent Kingdom's elite execution squad, the Bloodhound Unit. James hadn't just exiled her, he was cleaning up his loose ends. A rejected human mate who knew the king's genetic vulnerabilities was too big a liability to leave alive. "They're coming to kill me," Elena whispered, her breath hitching as the distant thud of heavy paws crashing through the wet underbrush echoed through the trees. The physical agony of the severed bond flared in response to the approaching alpha magic, making her knees buckle. Thomas didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, his silver-flecked eyes fixed on the treeline where the faint, glowing yellow eyes of giant wolves were beginning to materialize through the fog. "They are coming to eliminate a witness," Thomas corrected calmly, extending a gloved hand toward her. "But they are about to find a sovereign. The choice is yours, Elena. Die here as a discarded human footnote in their history, or step into my realm and rewrite the rules of this world." The trees burst open. 3 massive pitch-black Lycan warriors in their beast forms leaped into the clearing, their jaws dripping with foam and anticipation. At the center was Commander Victor, James's most ruthless enforcer. He bared his massive fangs, his deep growl vibrating the wet earth. "By order of King James, the human parasite is to be neutralized," Victor roared in his mind-link voice, a telepathic blast meant to paralyze human targets. He lunged, his massive claws extended to rip Elena's throat out. Elena didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. With a surge of raw defiance that eclipsed her fear, she reached out and slammed her palm into Thomas's open hand. The moment their skin met, an explosion of cold, brilliant violet light erupted from their clasped hands. It wasn't the warm, blinding gold of the moon goddess. It was a deep, velvet darkness that roared like a silent hurricane. The ground beneath them dissolved into a swirling vortex of liquid shadow. Victor's claws snapped shut on empty air as Elena and Thomas plummeted downward, falling not into dirt, but into an endless, starlit abyss. The transition was violent and instantaneous. The freezing rain and the scent of wet pine vanished, replaced by an eerie, profound silence and the sharp, intoxicating aroma of ozone and winter mint. Elena gasped as her feet hit solid stone. She was standing in a colossal subterranean throne room carved from solid, iridescent obsidian that reflected a sky filled with violet nebulae and twin silver moons. Thousands of ethereal figures, the denizens of the Shadow Realm, stood in tiered galleries, their pale skin and dark garments giving them the appearance of elegant ghosts. They all stared down at her, not with the brutal hunger of the wolves, but with a collective, breathless awe. "Welcome to the Underkingdom, Elena," Thomas's voice echoed throughout the massive expanse. He released her hand, but the violet energy continued to dance across her fingertips, pulsing in perfect synchronization with her heartbeat. Elena looked down at her hands, her medical instincts immediately kicking in. The blackened, bruised skin of her rejection mark wasn't just healing, it was transforming. The necrotic burnt tissue was being purged, replaced by intricate glowing violet veins that pulsed beneath her skin. For the first time in her life, her cellular regeneration wasn't just fixing a wound, it was absorbing the dark, primordial magic of the environment around her. What did you do to me?" she gasped, her voice trembling as she felt an immense dormant wellspring of power unlock within her chest, filling the empty void left by James's rejection. "I did nothing but open the door," Thomas said, stepping up the dais toward his throne. "Your human healing gift was never a mutation, Elena. It was an ancient, dormant lineage of the Shadow Realm, suppressed by generations of living under the oppressive light of the sun-dwelling wolves. Your cells don't just heal, they adapt. They conquer." Before Elena could process the staggering revelation of her true heritage, the shadow vortex in the center of the room rippled violently. A heavy, blood-soaked object materialized from the void, crashing onto the obsidian floor. It was Commander Victor. But he was no longer a terrifying apex predator. He was back in his human form, his body convulsing, his skin covered in terrifying, pulsing black veins. He had chased them into the shadow vortex, and the raw, unyielding energy of the shadow realm was tearing his Lycan cells apart from the inside out. He was dying of acute magical necrosis. "Mercy!" Victor wheezed, his eyes rolling back as he looked up at Elena, recognizing her as the only healer capable of stopping cellular decay. "Healer, save me." Thomas looked from the dying commander to Elena, a sharp, testing glint in his silver eyes. "He represents the kingdom that discarded you. The king who broke your soul. You can let the shadows consume him, or you can show them what a true sovereign of the dark can do." Elena stood at the ultimate crossroads. Her old life was completely shattered, and the forces that had hunted her now lay bleeding at her feet. Elena did not hesitate. The instincts of a healer overrode the bitter sting of betrayal. She crossed the slick obsidian floor, her tattered cloak brushing against the dark stone as she knelt beside Commander Victor. The Lycan enforcer gasped, his skin blistering as the volatile shadow magic of the realm tore through his wolf physiology like acid. "Do not move," Elena commanded, her voice ringing with a calm, absolute authority that surprised even her. She placed her hands flat against Victor's chest. The moment her palms made contact, the newly awakened violet energy beneath her skin surged forward. In the past, healing a wolf required her to painstakingly absorb their toxins into her own body, leaving her weak and bedridden for days. But now, as the dark magic of the shadow realm channeled through her, her cells operated on an entirely different level. She didn't just absorb the necrosis, she commanded it. With a sharp intake of breath, Elena drew the black, corrupting shadow energy out of Victor's bloodstream, weaving it expertly through her own pulsing violet veins and neutralizing it instantly. The crowd in the galleries gasped in unison. Thomas watched from his throne, a slow, fascinated smile curling the corners of his lips. Victor's convulsions stopped. His breathing evened out, the black veins receding from his face. He looked up at Elena, his yellow Lycan eyes wide with an emotion wolves rarely showed to humans. Pure, unadulterated terror mixed with profound reverence. "You," Victor croaked, clutching his chest. "What have you become?" "Tell James," Elena whispered, leaning down so only the commander could hear her, "that the frail human he cast out died in the woods. Tell him I am no longer his healer. And I am certainly no longer his prey." With a wave of his hand, Thomas commanded the shadows to rise, wrapping around Victor and flinging the healed but terrified commander back through the vortex, discarding him on the borders of the mortal realm. In the days that followed, the tension within the Underkingdom grew palpable. Elena was given quarters in the eastern wing of the Obsidian Palace, a sprawling room that overlooked a forest of glowing silver trees that fed on starlight. She spent her nights training under Thomas's direct supervision. The Shadow King was a demanding mentor, but unlike James, who had viewed her as a fragile asset to be hidden away, Thomas pushed her to embrace her lethal potential. "Shadow magic isn't just destruction, Elena. Thomas murmured one evening, standing close behind her in the training courtyard as she practiced shaping the violet energy. His hands gently guided her wrists, his touch sending a strange electric spark through her veins. The scent of winter mint and ozone wrapped around her like a warm blanket. It is adaptability. It is the ability to survive where nothing else can. Your cells can mimic any magic they encounter. You are a living siphon. Elena looked back at him, her breath catching as she noted the fierce, protective intensity in his silver-flecked eyes. Why are you helping me like this, Thomas? What do you truly want from a rejected human? Thomas stepped closer, his thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw, stopping just over the faint, glowing violet mark where James's rejection had once burned. Because you were never meant to be a subservient wolf's mate, Elena. You belong to the night. And I have waited a very long time for someone who can stand beside me, rather than in my shadow. The vulnerability in his voice was real, a stark contrast to his cold, regal exterior. Elena felt a powerful magnetic pull toward him, an attraction born not from a cosmic curse, but from mutual respect and shared isolation. But their growing connection was abruptly threatened. A messenger burst into the courtyard, bowing low, his face pale with dread. My king, the messenger strained, scouts report that King James has mobilized the entire Crescent Pack. They have amassed at the Shadow Gates on the mortal border. James claims the Underkingdom has kidnapped his fated mate, and he is threatening to wage an all-out war if Elena is not returned to him by the next full moon. Elena's blood ran cold. James wasn't coming to rescue her out of love. He was coming because Victor's report had terrified him. A human healer with the power of the Shadow Realm was a threat to his throne. Before we see how Elena and Thomas prepare to face the wrath of an entire Lycan army, I want to take a moment to ask you a question. Drop a comment below right now. Do you think King James genuinely regrets his choice, or is he just terrified of Elena's new power? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the epic confrontation that's about to unfold. Elena turned to Thomas, the violet energy flaring wildly around her fists. He will tear the border apart to get to me. Thomas looked out toward the dark horizon, his eyes hardening into twin chips of ice. Let him try. He is walking into an abyss he cannot comprehend. The red hue bleeding through the sky was not the result of an assault on the gates. It was an internal rupture. The alarm screamed from the depths of the royal archives, the secure vault where the ancient lineages and treaties of the Shadow Realm were kept. Elena and Thomas materialized in the vault through a vortex of liquid shadow, their weapons drawn, only to find the High Archivist slumped against a pillar, unconscious but breathing. At the center of the room, standing before the shattered glass of a starlight pedestal, was Arthur Cross. In his trembling hands he held a glowing ancient obsidian scroll. Arthur! Elena gasped, her heart dropping into her stomach. What are you doing? The old man turned, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. I'm saving you, child, he choked out, his voice cracked with a devastating mixture of fear and guilt. I lied to you, Elena. I brought you the warning about the solar prism to make you panic. To make you run. But I didn't come here on my own. James has my family hostage. He forced me to find the truth. The truth about what? Elena demanded, taking a step forward as the violet energy around her fingers began to spark erratically. Thomas stepped up beside her, his silver eyes fixed on the scroll in Arthur's hands. A look of grim, ancient realization settled onto the Shadow King's features. The scroll of the first alignment, Thomas murmured, his voice deadly quiet. The records of the original bloodlines before the separation of the realms. He's right, Arthur sobbed, unrolling the dark parchment. As the ancient text caught the light of the twin moons, a massive projection of shimmering light filled the room. It was a genealogical map, written in the golden script of the moon goddess and the silver runes of the Shadow Realm. Elena stared at the projection, her breath completely catching in her throat. At the very root of the map, two ancient souls were intertwined, a wolf king and a shadow sovereign. And at the absolute end of the bloodline, where the two lineages converged after centuries of separation, sat her own name. Elena Brooks. You aren't just a human healer with a dormant shadow gene, Elena, Arthur whispered, his hands shaking violently. You are the literal descendant of the Prime Unity. The moon goddess didn't pull a joke on James. The fated mate bond he felt wasn't a mistake. It triggered because your blood holds the key to absolute dominance over both the Lycan and the Shadow realms. But it wasn't meant for him alone. Elena's eyes widened as she looked at the text. The golden thread of her severed bond hadn't been a standard mate tie. It was a universal anchor. And as she looked from the scroll to Thomas, she saw a corresponding silver rune glowing brightly beneath his collar, pulsing in perfect flawless harmony with the violet veins in her own hands. The bond didn't break because James rejected you, Thomas said softly, his silver eyes locked onto hers with profound, overwhelming intensity. It broke because it was trying to attach itself to its true counterpart. The universe didn't make you for a wolf, Elena. You are my fated match. The true balance of the night. The revelation struck her like a physical blow, shattering everything she believed about her identity. She wasn't an anomaly, a fragile human, or a curse. She was the living bridge between two worlds. James hadn't just rejected a human. He had unknowingly discarded the sovereign power of the entire realm. And now he knew it. Before we witness how King James reacts when he discovers he threw away the ultimate power of the world, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below right now. Did you see this cosmic twist coming, or are you as shocked as Elena? If you are loving this massive revelation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for the rest of this epic journey. Suddenly, the obsidian scroll in Arthur's hands flared with a blinding, toxic golden light. James hadn't just sent Arthur to find information. He had turned the old man into a living homing beacon. A cruel, booming laugh echoed through the vault from the glowing parchment. It was James's telepathic voice, dripping with arrogant malice. "Thank you for finding the missing piece, Elena," the Lycan King roared in her mind. A human Luna was a disgrace. But a queen who commands the shadows and the wolves? That is an empire. I am coming to reclaim my property. With a deafening explosion, the magical feedback shattered the scroll, knocking Arthur unconscious. The stakes had just been raised to an absolute apocalyptic level. James wasn't coming for war anymore. He was coming for an empire, and he was heading straight for them. The air in the Underkingdom grew freezing, thick with the scent of burning sulfur and ozone as King James's forces breached the border. The sky above, once a beautiful tapestry of violet nebulae, bled a sick, toxic yellow. James had cracked the shadow gates using the stolen solar prism, and the devastating light of the mortal sun was pouring into the subterranean world like liquid fire. Elena stood in the courtyard of the obsidian palace, her chest heaving as the ambient sunlight stripped away the protective shadow magic around her. Because of her unique cellular structure, she felt the agony of both realms. The primordial darkness inside her screamed at the invading light, while the lingering remnants of her old life pulled at her soul. "Elena, you must stay in the inner sanctum," Thomas commanded, his silver-flecked eyes dark with absolute fury as he strapped on his midnight black armor. The silver runes along his collar flared wildly. "The solar light is designed to neutralize shadow energy. It will tear your adapting cells apart if you face it head-on." "I am the reason he is here, Thomas," Elena argued, her voice cracking with desperation. "He wants my blood to anchor his throne. If I hide, he will burn this entire world to ashes just to flush me out." Before Thomas could answer, a massive shockwave rocked the palace. The defensive towers at the perimeter crumbled into dust. Through the smoke, a terrifying sight materialized. Hundreds of giant Lycan warriors, their golden eyes gleaming with bloodlust, charging through the fractured gates. Leading them was King James himself, his golden alpha aura boosted to a blinding, destructive intensity by the solar prism mounted on a heavy iron chariot behind him. "Thomas Vance." James's voice boomed through the cavern, amplified by the stolen celestial weapon. "Hand over my mate, or I will turn your kingdom into a graveyard of light." Thomas didn't hesitate. With a final lingering look at Elena, a look filled with a fierce, protective love that transcended any fated bond, he turned and dove into the fray, his body dissolving into a hurricane of pure, razor-sharp shadows. The battle was catastrophic. Thomas fought with the savage grace of a primordial god, tearing through the Lycan front lines, but the solar prism was too powerful. Every time his shadows surged, the beam of concentrated sunlight cut through them, searing his flesh and forcing him back. Elena watched in horror from the upper terrace as James caught Thomas off guard. Backed by 3 high elders channeling the prism's energy, James threw a heavy silver-infused net over the Shadow King. The reaction was instantaneous. A horrific hiss of burning flesh echoed through the courtyard as Thomas fell to his knees, his silver eyes dimming as the solar light suppressed his magic entirely. "Look at your protector now, Elena," James shouted, stepping onto the palace dais, his clawed hands covered in Thomas's blood. He looked up at the terrace where she stood, his face twisted in an arrogant, triumphant sneer. "A fragile human, a weakened shadow king. You belong to me. Your power belongs to the Crescent Throne." Elena backed away, her heart pounding in absolute despair. Thomas was captured, his life slowly draining under the agonizing solar net. Arthur lay unconscious in the medical wing, and the armies of the Underkingdom were being driven back by the blinding light. She was completely alone, facing the apex predator who had broken her soul once before. The situation was entirely hopeless. Her power felt small, her body fragile, and the dark void in her chest threatened to consume her completely. Before we see if Elena can find a way to survive this utter destruction and save the man she loves, I need to know your thoughts. Drop a comment below right now. Is there any way out for Elena, or has the Lycan King won the ultimate prize? If you are sitting on the edge of your seat right now, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the mind-blowing turning point next. James leaped up to the terrace, landing with a heavy, bone-shaking thud. He stalked toward her, his golden eyes filled with a terrifying, possessive hunger. He reached out a massive clawed hand to grab her throat. "Come home, Elena," he whispered. The cold metal of James's clawed fingers brushed against the skin of Elena's throat, but as the pressure tightened, something inside her snapped. The despair that had paralyzed her moments ago evaporated, replaced by a white-hot, celestial fury. She looked past James's shoulder down into the courtyard, where Thomas lay pinned under the agonizing solar net, his silver eyes still locked onto hers, silently imploring her to fight. "I am not his property," Elena thought, her mind clearing with absolute razor-sharp certainty. "I am the descendant of the Prime Unity. I am the balance." Instead of pulling away from James's grasp, Elena lunged forward, slamming her hands flat against his massive, muscular chest. James laughed, expecting her fragile human hands to bruise against his hardened Lycan flesh. "You still don't get it, do you? You have no wolf, Elena. You are nothing against an alpha." "I don't need a wolf, James," Elena whispered, her hazel eyes completely rolling over into a brilliant, swirling vortex of deep violet and liquid silver. "I am a cellular healer. And it's time you learned what happens when a healer decides to stop fixing things." The moment her skin made contact with his chest, her newly awakened prime lineage ignited. She didn't just channel the shadow magic. She reached out with her cellular authority and seized control of the golden alpha energy radiating from James's own bloodline. Because her ancestors were the root of both realms, his Lycan magic recognized her. It didn't fight her, it obeyed her. With a gasping breath, Elena inverted her gift. Instead of pulling toxins out, she used her cellular command to destabilize the bonds holding James's alpha aura together. A blinding explosion of violet and gold light erupted from her palms, tearing through James's chest. The Lycan King shrieked in absolute agony as his own stolen cosmic energy backfired, throwing him backward off the palace terrace. He crashed heavily into the courtyard below, his golden aura shattering like cheap glass. The sudden rupture of James's power sent a shockwave through the entire battlefield. The Lycan warriors froze, their telepathic mind link short-circuiting as their king's dominance was forcefully overthrown. Elena didn't waste a single second. She leaped from the terrace, her cloak billowing around her as she landed gracefully in the courtyard, surrounded by a swirling aura of pure liquid shadow and starlight. She rushed to Thomas's side, ignoring the stinging heat of the solar net. "Elena, no," Thomas wheezed, his skin blistering from the light. "The solar energy." "Hold on," she commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of a true sovereign. She placed her hands directly onto the burning silver fibers of the net. Her cells adapted instantly to the threat. She absorbed the toxic concentrated sunlight into her right hand, passed it through her chest where her prime core neutralized it, and channeled it out through her left hand as pure, restorative shadow energy straight into Thomas's heart. The solar net dissolved into harmless ash. Thomas gasped, his silver eyes flaring back to life with a blinding, cosmic intensity. The physical damage to his body healed in seconds, his skin pristine, his power returning tenfold. He stood up, towering beside her, his hand finding hers. The silver rune beneath his collar and the violet veins in her arms pulsed in absolute flawless synchronization. The true fated bond was fully realized. Before we witness the final explosive confrontation between the true rulers of the night and the broken Lycan King, I want to invite you to take action right now. If you are cheering for Elena's incredible awakening, leave a comment below with the word "Sovereign" and hit that subscribe button. Your energy drives this story forward. Now let's finish this. James struggled to his feet across the courtyard, coughing up black, necrotic blood, his face twisted in a mask of pure, humiliated rage. He crawled toward the iron chariot, reaching for the controls of the solar prism to unleash one final desperate blast of total destruction. But Elena and Thomas stood together at the center of the courtyard, completely unified, ready to deliver justice. The courtyard fell into a dead, suffocating silence as King James gripped the controls of the iron chariot. His face was a mask of feral madness, the skin around his eyes cracking as he pushed the solar prism beyond its mechanical limits. The stolen celestial weapon let out a high-pitched, deafening whine, its crystalline core spinning furiously as it gathered every remaining scrap of light from the mortal sun, focusing it into a single blinding beam of apocalyptic energy. If I cannot have the power of the Prime Unity, then no one will. James roared, his voice cracking with the desperate fury of a broken tyrant. I will burn this entire realm to the bedrock. He slammed the firing lever down. A massive roaring column of white-hot solar light erupted from the prism, tearing through the obsidian cobblestones, melting the stone into liquid glass as it surged straight toward Elena and Thomas. The heat was immense, enough to vaporize a lesser wolf or shadow being in an instant. But Elena did not flinch. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly ahead of Thomas, her hands extended toward the oncoming inferno. Thomas placed his palms flat against her shoulder blades, channeling the entire unfathomable wellspring of the Underkingdom's shadow magic directly into her spine. We are the night, James, Elena whispered, her voice echoing with the layered ancient resonance of 1,000 ancestors. And the sun always sets. The moment the solar beam struck her hands, the ultimate twist of her prime lineage manifested. Her adapting cells didn't just absorb the light, they transformed it. Because her bloodline sat at the very root of both worlds, she didn't see the solar light and the shadow magic as opposing forces. She saw them as two halves of a single cosmic whole. With a fierce, defiant cry, Elena bent the solar light to her absolute will. She wove the burning white sunbeams together with Thomas's midnight shadows, fusing them within her core until they became a brand new terrifying force, twilight magic. It was a dense, shimmering violet fire that held the burning heat of a star and the crushing weight of an abyss. She threw her hands forward, releasing the fused energy. The blast of twilight magic didn't just clash with James's solar beam, it swallowed it. The violet fire raced up the stream of light, tearing through the air with the sound of a shattering mountain. It slammed directly into the solar prism, causing the crystalline core to detonate in a spectacular explosion of glass and cosmic dust. The concussive wave threw the remaining Lycan warriors to the ground, stripping away their battle forms completely. James was blasted backward into the palace wall, his armor shattering into pieces as he slumped to the ground, completely neutralized. His alpha status was gone, his core burned out by the very weapon he had tried to wield against his fated match. Before we witness the ultimate fate of the fallen king and see how Elena cleanses the realm of this corruption, I want to take a moment for a very important CT. Look at how far our human healer has come. If you want to see justice delivered and see her claim her true throne, drop a comment below right now and make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Your subscriptions are the fuel that keeps this channel running every single week. Elena walked through the clearing smoke, her footsteps echoing softly on the cooled obsidian. Thomas walked beside her, his hand firmly holding hers, his silver eyes shining with pure pride and reverence. They stopped just inches from where James lay gasping, looking up at the woman he had once deemed a fragile human parasite. Elena. James wheezed, his voice trembling as he looked at her glowing violet veins and the silver crown of starlight beginning to manifest over her head. Please, you're a healer. Save me. Elena looked down at him, her hazel eyes completely calm, holding no hatred, only absolute closure. I am a healer, James. And the only way to heal a kingdom is to cut out the rot. She did not strike him down. Instead, she raised her hand and severed the last remaining telepathic tether James held over his pack, casting his consciousness out of the royal lineage forever. The High Council elders who had mocked her in the citadel fell to their knees, bowing their heads in complete surrender to the new sovereign of the night. The toxic yellow hue that had choked the sky of the Underkingdom slowly dissolved, washed away by a gentle rain of silver starlight. The fractured shadow gates healed, sealing the realm once more from the volatile interference of the mortal world. Peace, ancient and unshakable, settled over the Obsidian Valleys. 3 months after the Great Realignment, the high citadel of the Shadow Realm was packed to its towering rafters. But the atmosphere was entirely different from the day Elena had been cast out of the Lycan court. There were no sneering elders, no cruel laughter, and no undercurrents of predatory disdain. Instead, thousands of beings from both realms, including the remnants of the Crescent Pack who had chosen redemption over tyranny, stood together in breathtaking, unified silence. At the center of the dais stood Arthur Cross, fully recovered and dressed in the fine silk robes of the realm's chief physician. His hands no longer shook as he held 2 heavy ornate crowns forged from starlight and midnight iron. Elena stepped into the light of the twin silver moons. She wore a cascading gown of deep violet silk that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid shadow with every step she took. Her skin was flawless, the intricate violet veins of her prime lineage now glowing softly beneath her skin, a beautiful testament to her absolute mastery over her cellular power. Beside her walked Thomas, his silver-flecked eyes locked onto hers with a fierce, unwavering devotion that made the concept of a standard fated bond look like a drop of water compared to an ocean. By the authority of the ancient bloodlines and the balance of the night, Arthur's voice echoed throughout the massive expanse, ringing with deep emotion, I present to you your sovereigns, King Thomas and Queen Elena of the unified realm. As Arthur placed the starlight crown upon Elena's head, the entire citadel erupted into a deafening, thunderous roar of cheers and applause. The remaining Lycan warriors bowed low, their heads touching the cold stone in genuine reverence. They no longer saw a fragile human to be used and discarded. They saw the living bridge that had saved their species from complete stagnation. Later that evening, after the grand celebration had quieted into a peaceful hum, Elena and Thomas stood together on the highest balcony of the Obsidian Palace. The scent of winter mint and ozone wrapped around them, comforting and familiar. Thomas stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his cool lips gently brushing the side of her neck where the burn of James's rejection had long been replaced by a beautiful glowing silver crest of the prime unity. Are you happy, my queen? Thomas whispered, his deep baritone vibrating warmly against her spine. Elena turned in his embrace, placing her hands against his chest, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of his heart beating in perfect synchronization with her own. She looked out over the vast, beautiful expanse of her new home, her heart filled with a profound sense of fulfillment, joy, and peace. For the first time in my life, Thomas, I am home, Elena murmured, a radiant smile gracing her lips as she leaned up to meet his lips in a deep, earned kiss that sealed their eternal promise to the night. We didn't just survive the darkness. We conquered it. And there, under the eternal light of the twin silver moons, the broken human healer who had been cast out into the woods found her true strength, her true people, and a love that would echo through the realms for eternity.